welcome students. Today we are looking at violence in sports. In the previous lesson, we looked at boxing as again we described the game of boxing. We looked at the history, both in the world and in Nigeria, the basic skills of boxing. We looked at the officials in boxing and the rules and regulations in boxing. But in today's lesson, we want to define violence, look at the causes and the effects. What is violence? Have you seen somebody behaving in a manner to hurt somebody before, or to hurt his or her fellow? What do you call that act? That is an act of violence. Violence is an intentional act aimed at hurting an individual, either to kill or to destroy both lives and properties. Violence is an antisocial behavior which is intentional, that is, it is purposeful. It is what someone does in order to hurt, to kill, or to destroy properties. This violence can be physical, as we can see, can be domestic, can be sexual, can be psychological, can be emotional, can also be communal violence, can also be sports violence. When we talk about physical violence, there is a physical action. Talk about domestic violence, violence in the home, sexual violence, violence abusing people. What is violence in sports? As you can see from the clip playing, you can see a group of persons engaging in physical action to hurt the fellow. Violence in sports can be defined as a physical action in sports that gives rise to injury or harm. It refers to a behavior which can cause harm, and this violence is not in line with the conduct of a game. You see people behaving violently in sports, it could either be they are violent persons or they are not. Let's examine this
and the option defence by Mitchell.
Violent action.
Full of running, so strong in a challenge. Takes a hit and goes down.
You see the number 7 jersey lady
And a bit of feistiness
acted
there.
intentionally.
There's absolutely no way
The lady in blue
that you would do that. I think
falls.
that's what Van der Donk, I don't think she liked that. And then just
Originally,
staffers.
the lady in blue, her action
Think
was
there's anything in
not
it.
intentional as she matched the lady in red. Now, violent acts in sports can be spontaneous or premeditated. When we say spontaneous, means they just occur without you thinking about them. It just happens. But the premeditated one, you have already sat down and calculated on how to carry out the act. And the various categories of violence in sports can either be among athletes, spectators, or the officials. Let's look at them one after the other. It can be violence among opposing players. Players of two different teams can be violent at each other, maybe due to the nature of the game, maybe due to poor officiating, or the temperament of the individuals at that time, as you can see. The next one is violence of players against officials. Some players may decide to beat up their officials, maybe if the official is not acting in accordance to what they feel or perceive should be the main action of the game. Thirdly, it can be violence among players of the same team. Let's take for instance, an attacker is waiting for a midfielder to feed him or her ball, and the midfielder is not forthcoming. If the attacker is a violent type, there is every tendency that he or she may attack the midfielder. When the violence is among team players, it's very bad. Violence of opposing supporters. There's the supporters of team red fighting against supporters of team blue. This is seen mostly in in team games where the supporters, maybe they have placed their bets, they are angry and they begin to fight. There are causes of violence in sports. These causes can degenerate to something very, very, very bad. These causes can either be as a result of poor officiating or the temperament of the individual at that point. It could be indiscipline. When a player is not disciplined, any little thing, he or she wants to take laws into his or her hands instead of reporting to the official at that very point. That is very, very bad. Another one can be poor seating arrangement. Let's take, for instance, players of Manchester United and Chelsea. They are seated together at the same place, and Manchester United is beating Chelsea. Any little thing can trigger violence in that environment. To safeguard this, there should be proper seating arrangement. Winning at all costs. Winning at all costs can also be part of it. Ignorance of the rules in a game. If a person is ignorant or doesn't know the rules of the game, there's every tendency that he or she might be violent, especially if the team he or she is supporting is losing. If you do not know the game, seek to know more of the game and the rules before you act ignorantly. These are some of it. What are the effects of violence in sports? When this violence arises, the impacts can be very, very devastating. Now, these impacts can be minimal or fatal, which could cause death. In a situation where the violence leads to hitting of people beyond the capacity they can bear, the persons may die. So violence can lead to death of people. Aside the death can also lead to severe disruption in the dynamics of the game. It changes the flow of the game, as the persons involved might want to fight to satisfy what they feel at that given time, not minding the consequences of the effect of their actions. Another effect is injury. It can cause severe injury, because when someone is violent, he or she might use what is with her or around him or her to injure the next person. This is because some persons cannot even control their temper. Once they are violent in real life, they bring it into the sporting world. Now, how do we prevent these violent behaviors in sports? This violence, as we have seen, can be caused by poor officiating, can also be caused by lack of rules of the game, can be caused by poor seating arrangement, can be caused by in fact so many other things. So what do you think can be the ways we can prevent them? The essence of prevention of the violence in sports is so that it doesn't degenerate into loss of lives and properties, into death of persons, into disruption of the game, into enmity and certain antisocial behaviors. It's because we know drugs also can cause it. So how do we prevent it? One, we can prevent it by preaching the spirit of sportsmanship to players. There should be balanced media reports. There should also be regular workshop and seminar. Athletes and spectators should be brought to speed on the latest rules and regulations of the game. Media reports should not be biased. It should report everything accordingly. We should discourage drug and substance abuse. When people abuse this, they tend not to be in their right senses, and any little thing, they begin to act inappropriately. Facilities and equipment should be in good shape. Then proper education of the rules and regulations of the game. These are some of it. We've looked at violence as an intentional act. We've also said can cause the destruction of lives and properties. We also looked at some of the ways we can manage this violence, such as good officiating, proper security network. Security should also be on ground. They should be briefed on the latest rules and regulations of the game.